hectare upon hectare of green, pockmarked with craters. In the month of June alone, almost 2,250 separate fires were detected in the Amazon rainforest, up from almost 1,900 fires in the same period last year. NGOs, terrified of a repeat of the infernos that raged in the region last summer, are sounding the alarm.
50.000 hectares, com alerta de desmatamento segundo o INPE, o Instituto Nacional de Pesquisas Espaciais. Isso é 78% maior do que o ano passado.
In this period of extreme heat, some of these fires occur naturally. Many others are started intentionally, often by farmers who first cut down trees and then set fire to the earth to clear the land. A long-established technique that, in conjunction with illegal logging, is gradually destroying the region, according to environmentalists.
O desmatamento em 2020 vai ser maior do que foi em 2019. Tem uma preocupação adicional à questão do desmatamento, que tem a ver com risco de termos queimadas sem controles, como foi em 2019, agora na estação de 2020.
Unregulated deforestation in the Amazon has always alarmed those trying to protect the lungs of the planet. But this year, the impact on the lungs of Brazilians is also of primary concern, as the country continues to see an explosion in cases of the new coronavirus. Communities in the Amazon are once again braced for the arrival of the thick smoke that sweeps across the region during fire season.
Rainstorms and floods battered southern China, with at least 78 people killed since the start of June, according to the Chinese Emergency Management Ministry. Another 12 million have been affected by property damage, road closures and other disruptions, including 720,000 people rescued or relocated from floodwaters. The flood season has caused $3.6 billion in economic losses, the ministry said, a further blow to a domestic economy already suffering from the coronavirus pandemic. Seasonal floodings hit much of China each year, and authorities have sought to mitigate the damage through the use of dams, particularly the massive three-gorge structure of the Yangtze. China's worst floods in recent years were in 1998, when more than 2,000 people died and almost 3 million homes were destroyed.
This video captured the moments when a pile of mine waste more than 75 meters high collapsed into an open jade mine. The pit was already full of water because of heavy rains, and a massive wave overtook dozens of miners who drowned in the muddy water. The disaster happened in a city and a township called Hapkan in northern Myanmar, in a state that borders China and India. The jade industry yields billions of dollars in the country, and the mines are largely under government control. Despite efforts to regulate, many miners are poor and scour the mine waste for stones the large operators may have missed. They work illegally in the dangerous conditions to provide for their families. An economic pressure now compounded by the coronavirus pandemic. It's a tragedy not without precedent. Just last year in the same region, 50 miners died in a similar collapse at a jade mine, and 115 died in the very same city in 2015.
Residents at the Balboa Peninsula in Newport Beach are left reeling this morning after high tide and high surf caused massive flooding in their community. CBS 2's Joy Benedict is live in Newport with a look at the mess left behind. Good morning, Joy.
Good morning, Amy. Yeah, we are live right now on Balboa Peninsula, and you can see the mess that's left behind after this high tide that came through here last night, flooding the area and leaving quite a bit of sand over here behind. It's not clear exactly how bad the businesses are on the inside, as many of them have not opened yet, but you can tell by the street that the high tide certainly did a lot of damage when it comes to the sand. Take a look at this video from last night as the waves washed ashore at about 8:30 early in the evening. That's when we are told the tide peaked at about 6.5 feet. Ocean waves crashed over the sand at the Balboa Pier in Newport Beach and into parking lots and streets, even destroying a sailboat due to the dangerous combination of the high tide and high surf that was there. Now, the National Weather Service has issued a high surf advisory through noon on Monday, warning that the waves and surf of 5 to 7 feet with sets of 8 feet were likely. Of course, witnesses say they could hear the waves crashing over the beach for several minutes.
It hasn't done this for probably about 30 years. So this is very unusual that we have it come off the ocean.
It was a torrent that came through. It was about 2 feet deep. And when I was here about an hour ago, there was huge lakes out on the sand from the big waves. And eventually one of those lakes came all the way to the sidewalk, and now it's rushing out.
And of course, this is the video that I was telling you about the boat itself. You can see that it had washed ashore about that same time. We're told it was then eventually battered into pieces. We were told that everyone was able to get off that boat. There were also reports that a lifeguard was hospitalized for injuries while trying to rescue 2 teens out near the Balboa Pier. Now, unfortunately, we are told that that high tide is going to be just as high today, this evening, also around that same time, around 8:30 or 9, but certainly back out here live in Newport Beach. There's a lot of cleanup to do today, and of course a lot of concern about what this means for the rest of this holiday weekend. Amy? The sounds at the beach on this holiday were certainly different, as heavy machinery pushed around sand and water after a king tide ravaged Newport Beach, leaving water and muck everywhere.
Well, every time a wave hit, everybody on the pier was like, yeah! It was like, whoa!
Maria Gillio watched the waves roll in from the Balboa Pier as spectators realized quickly this was more than just a show. The ocean was destructive.
Oh my God, what a mess.
The water washed ashore around 8:30 Friday night as neighbors say a king tide hit 7 feet. Throw in a high surf, and it was a 1-2 punch this community's infrastructure just couldn't hold back.
So the water came from the ocean side and came all the way to the bay. And the bay was full, so there was nowhere for it to go.
Gary Hill runs Hill's Boat Service and was up with the sun cleaning off his patio and checking his equipment for what was expected to be a busy day on the water.
You in a minute and go make sure I can pump fuel for 4th of July weekend.
Although most of the damage on shore appears to be cosmetic, a sailboat on the water Friday night didn't fare so well.
We just watched them sail right into the sand, straight like they were riding the waves.
Its mast had gotten kind of sideways, so I knew they were in trouble. As they got closer to the shore, I just started running to them. When I got there, I could see there was about 5 people still on the boat, and then we had to coach them off. They jumped off. The boat kept going back and forth from the waves. We were able to pull them up safely, and everybody was cool, but it was one of the most scariest things I've ever seen.
By morning, most of the water receded, except in this parking lot where numerous cars were flooded and abandoned, a messy reminder of the power of Mother Nature as the ocean is expected to rise again.
It's an ugly mess, but it'll be cleaned up. Yeah, we'll be back online.
And of course, it is the mighty Pacific that is causing all the problems out here on Newport Beach, as yet another king tide is expected out here today. That's why crews have been creating this sand berm along the shore, hoping to hold back the water and protect this community. From the Balboa Peninsula, I'm Joy Benedict, CBS 2 News.
Whenever they went out, they would see more and more elephants dead, and also ones that were ill and walking around like about to die apparently, and it seemed they were even dying very suddenly in some of the cases. The carcasses were animals that had fallen down while walking.
It's at this stage it's difficult to really tell what could be the cause of the mortality. We have eliminated from the local labs the possibility of anthrax being the cause of this mortality, but there's still a lot of infectious diseases and potentially other toxins that are being still investigated.
The reports were coming in 2 or 3 months ago when this first started. So something's happening and action is clearly needed. There's a number of reasons why it's not good for animals to be dying. But I think the primary reason is that we don't know what the cause is. And if it's disease, it's potentially bad. If it's poachers, it's equally.
This holiday weekend is without one popular tradition for millions of people in California. All beaches in the state are closed as part of Governor Gavin Newsom's effort to control the rising COVID-19 infection rates there. COVID cases are surging in dozens of states across the country, bringing the total number to more than 2.79 million, and the death toll is rising to more than 129,000. Michael George is in Rockaway Beach, New York. Michael, good morning to you.
Jeff, good morning. Thousands are expected to pack Rockaway Beach here later today, and they'll be greeted by city workers reminding them that masks are required on the sand and the boardwalk. It's a 4th of July unlike any other, with the coronavirus now at an all-time high across the U.S., and health experts blaming the decision by states to reopen early and many openly defying safety rules. 4th of July fireworks may be loaded and ready to launch on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., but in the nation's fight against the coronavirus, there's little to celebrate.
Right now, we are heading 1,000,000 miles per hour in the wrong direction.
New U.S. cases in a single day hit record highs Wednesday, Thursday, and again Friday, when more than 57,000 new cases were reported, showing the pandemic is winning.
It's absolutely the saddest thing, the most unnecessary situation that we're finding ourselves in, and it's behaviorally driven.
Cases in 37 states have risen since the economy started to reopen. In Arizona, 50 Phoenix firefighters tested positive. Another 40 are in quarantine. In Florida, a state where leaders resisted safety measures, 10,000 new cases were recorded Thursday alone. But now, with some Florida hospitals stretched to the limits caring for patients, Miami-Dade County put in a 10 p.m. to sunrise curfew until further notice. There and in other parts of the nation, popular beaches will be closed this holiday weekend.
We all wish we could have the beaches open, but it's just not the right thing to do.
Malibu, California Mayor Karen Farrer is keeping an eye on surfers after the governor ordered most Southern California beaches closed again. Since they reopened 3 weeks ago, there's been a surge in cases, including some lifeguards. And Galveston, Texas closed beaches, fearing crowds would pour in from Houston, where 1 out of 4 people tested positive.
Primarily, we're seeing a surge in young people who are really just not paying any regard to the risk of this.
A frustration for health professionals.
Do we really have to say hashtag don't kill grandma? People have to realize there are consequences to getting infected and spreading it to people who are vulnerable. They can die.
Many cities now require masks. In Santa Monica, anyone not wearing one could end up with a ticket. And Chicago is joining several areas, including New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, requiring visitors from hotspot states quarantine for 14 days upon arrival.
We're going to do everything that we can to keep members of the public safe.
That includes visitors from California, and some aren't happy about it.
I'm not going to go somewhere that's in full quarantine. Like, once you set foot on that ground, like, you have to quarantine. That's what that means. Like, I don't want to have to go through that.
And here in New York, one of the parts of the country with the lowest infection rates, leaders are alarmed about what's happening in the rest of the U.S. Indoor dining was supposed to start again on Monday. Now that's been postponed indefinitely.
Margaret Brennan. There is breaking news as we come on the air tonight. More than 57,000 new cases of coronavirus have been reported in the U.S. in the past 24 hours, setting yet another record for new infections just as the country heads into the July 4th holiday. Tonight, 37 states are seeing the number of new cases increasing, a dramatic turn that's now leading health officials to warn the outbreak will spiral further out of control if Americans don't stay home this weekend. In many places, parades and picnics have now been canceled, and even backyard barbecues are being discouraged. Beaches in Miami, which are usually crowded with tourists, are shut down tonight, and the county there has ordered a curfew starting in just a few hours. Nationwide, more than 129,000 people have been killed by coronavirus, and there are more than 2.7 million confirmed cases in the U.S. And while most of the country's traditional fireworks displays have been scaled back or canceled tonight, President Trump is heading to Mount Rushmore to watch a fireworks show with a crowd that could top 7,500 people. South Dakota's governor says wearing masks and social distancing won't be enforced. There is a lot of news to get to tonight, and our team of correspondents is standing by to cover it all. CBS's Janet Shamlian is going to lead off our coverage tonight from Galveston Beach in Texas. Janet?
Margaret, this is an unprecedented 4th of July weekend in Galveston. No one in the water and no one on the beach. Across the country, it looks nothing like a traditional holiday. And officials say that's because the surge can be traced back to Memorial Day and the loosening of restrictions. So for now, it's going to be safety over celebration. On a weekend honoring independence, little freedom to celebrate it. Beaches closed coast to coast, from Miami Beach, which now has an overnight curfew, to Southern California, where lifeguards became infected, and much of the Texas coast. Shutting down, not a popular decision.
I don't think it's necessary to close, the beaches, especially today.
Galveston feared crowds would come for a getaway from Houston, where 1 out of 4 tests are now coming back positive.
Primarily, we're seeing a surge in young people who are really just not paying any regard to the risk of this.
Officials are trying to avoid scenes like this from Memorial Day. In Texas, the governor issued a statewide mask order and closed bars. Chris Pallone is keeping his Fort Worth bar open in defiance.
I'm responsible for 15 employees' ability to feed their children.
With cases surging, Dr. Anthony Fauci was candid with the BBC.
You've been losing this battle, haven't you, recently?
Admittedly, yes, we have.
Tonight, coronavirus cases are rising in 37 states. Places like Phoenix, where more than 50 firefighters tested positive. Another 40 are in quarantine. People in Northern California are scrambling to get tested, waiting hours.
It's spreading up everywhere, and everybody, is really worried about what's happening. It's taking it more seriously.
While some cities in Southern California are now fining those who don't wear masks. CBS News Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. John LaPook.
The science is clear. Wear a mask, practice social distancing. And in general, outdoors is safer than indoors because outdoors there's improved ventilation and less opportunity for the virus to be spread through the air.
For businesses like this Galveston restaurant, it won't be the weekend it usually is, and the owner is fine with that. What do you think about the beaches being closed?
Well, the beach being closed, it should have never gotten open. No offense to the outsiders or the tourists.
Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Dallas have all canceled fireworks, and New York has been doing smaller displays throughout the week.
The people seen here in the water have just jumped into the sea in a desperate attempt to reach Europe. They at first fled Libya on a dinghy and were taken into the Ocean Viking. But the rescue ship has been stranded for days, with neither Italy or Malta ready to take in the 180 migrants on board. The NGO's rescuers have taken back several migrants who have jumped off. Tension has been high on the ship, with dozens of migrants threatening to hurt themselves and harm others, including the crew. Violent fights have broken off.
La situation est vraiment critique. C'est la première fois dans l'histoire de SOS Méditerranée, en 270 opérations de sauvetage que nous avons menées, que nous sommes amenés à déclarer l'état d'urgence.
There is hope for improvement, though. An Italian medical team has examined the people on board, and a source at the Italian Interior Ministry says the migrants could be transferred to a quarantine ship in Sicily. Italy and Malta have adopted a hardline approach on illegal migration, believing that if they take migrants in, this would encourage many others to cross over from North Africa. 100,000 people attempted that crossing last year.
On Wednesday, Hong Kong marked 23 years since control of the territory was handed from Britain to China. But the day was marred by violence against the onset of a new security law passed by Beijing. Amid some of the uglier scenes, disturbing video emerged of a riot officer being stabbed in the arm by a protester. The officer was apparently trying to subdue a rioter before being restrained by a protester and then stabbed by another. A suspect was arrested earlier this morning. Around 300 were detained on Wednesday as protests erupted into clashes. 9 arrests were made for violating the new law. That law obliges China and Hong Kong to establish 2 national security bodies, both accountable to Beijing. 4 types of crimes are listed: secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with external forces which risk national security. Penalties are harsh, up to life in prison for some. The law has been criticised by several Western nations, including Britain. Prime Minister Boris Johnson renewed promises on Wednesday to allow citizenship rights to nearly 3 million Hong Kong residents. That's riled Beijing, which says it's a violation of previous agreements when the territory was handed over.
We made clear, Mr. Speaker, that if China continued down this path, we would introduce a new route for those with British national overseas status to enter the UK, granting them limited leave to remain, with the ability to live and work in the UK and thereafter to apply for citizenship. And that is precisely what we will do now.
This seriously violates its own promise, seriously violates international law and the basic principles governing international relations. China strongly condemns this and reserves the right to take further responses. All consequences will be borne by the United Kingdom.
These are only the residual activities, some youngsters going out to the streets. If you do not violate the law, you will not be prosecuted. I think the one country, two systems has rather been damaged by the riots in recent years. Now China is trying to fix it. I myself actually hold a BNO passport, so I'm actually also entitled to what the UK has promised yesterday about UK residency. So my understanding is there's only 300,000 people eligible for that, and then with their families, it's allegedly 3 million people. But I think I asked many of my friends, they are not going.
The UK has defied China's solemn and just stance by changing their policy to allow people to take up residence and become naturalized citizens. This infringes upon their own promise and violates the basic standards of international law. China strongly condemns the action and retains the right to take further countermeasures. The UK must bear the consequences that will arise from this.
Stay out of our internal affairs. That's the reaction from China's foreign ministry after Australia said it was actively considering offering safe haven to Hong Kong residents. China approved a new security law for Hong Kong on Tuesday, and the following day hundreds of arrests were made in the territory as protests were held to mark the 23rd anniversary of the handover from British to Chinese rule. Joining me now, our international affairs editor, Armin Jordan. Armin, China has threatened to retaliate for the UK offering residency and then citizenship to up to 3 million Hong Kongers. This touches on the political hot potato that is immigration in the UK.
Yeah, we don't know exactly what this Chinese retaliation is going to be at the moment because the Foreign Ministry hasn't given many details about this. But it's true that in the UK there seems to be a political consensus about these measures to help Hong Kongers. You've got both the left and the right of the Conservative Party in the UK, which appear to be united, even though usually the left wing of the Conservative Party is more liberal on matters of immigration and the right wing is more strict. But in this case, they've come together, and indeed other political parties in the UK are also essentially agreeing that there has to be special treatment for Hong Kong, because in the case of Hong Kong, the whole human rights issue is underscored by this historical relationship between the UK and Hong Kong. I think it will be interesting, though, to see how this development goes down with the average Brexit voter, because, of course, those people voted, they would say, to take back control of their own borders. And with that in mind, the British government is designing a points-based immigration system. One of the criteria that you have to meet in the future if you want to come to the UK with a work visa is to be earning a certain income threshold in salary. And Hong Kongers will be exempt from that. So we'll have to see how this goes down in Brexit voting heartlands. I suppose it's going to depend on how many Hong Kongers actually decide to take up this offer in the end.
And is China under much pressure because of this new law in the rest of the world?
Well, China has support in the United Nations as well as opposition. There are some countries like Venezuela and Cuba which see the international response to China's security law as Western interference in Chinese affairs, as a kind of vain Western fight back against waning Western influence in the world, as they would see it. But of course there are plenty of other countries that have come forward in the UN to say that China must reconsider this law, but of course they're shying away from an open conflict with such an important trading partner that China is, and that's the situation that the European Union currently finds itself in. In terms of actual measures to watch, so countries that are taking measures rather than just saying things, we've mentioned the UK already. I think you mentioned Australia in your introduction. So Australia is considering safe haven measures somewhat similar to what the UK has already done. And the other country, of course, the US, is worth watching because the whole US-Chinese relationship is so important these days. The US House of Representatives has already passed a bill which will impose sanctions on banks that do business with Chinese officials who've been identified as cracking down on the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong, but that hasn't entered into law yet because it has to go to the Senate and then to President Trump himself. So what he will do is obviously something that will be interesting to watch, because he'll be caught between different sort of forces in this election year.
All right, thank you very much, Armin.
To stay or leave? Many are asking themselves the question, with the UK offering residency and possible citizenship for up to 3 million Hong Kongers after China passed a controversial national security law.
It would
be in my consideration, because now if I am qualified to work there, there's an option for me.
According to the UK, China's security law goes against the one country, two systems promise made during the handover of Hong Kong to the mainland 23 years ago. The British government has said it will allow Hong Kongers with British national overseas status to relocate their families and eventually apply for citizenship. The move has angered Beijing, saying the UK must bear the consequences without specifying what they were.
严重违背自身承诺，严重违反国际法和国际关系基本准则。中方对此表示强烈谴责，并保留作出进一步反应的权利。
China says the law is required to crush violence after pro-democracy protests rocked the semi-autonomous region last year. But some fear it will allow for a new era of political repression. Other countries have also floated the idea of facilitating immigration for Hong Kong residents, including Australia, Taiwan, and the United States.